Hi, this is Leithia from Farm View Creators. Today we're going to work on the butterfly garden insert for the interchangeable signpost stand. So I'm just separating all my pieces out so that I can work on the background. I wanted to kind of have a textured, multicolored look. So I used several colors. I used Angel Eyes, Duck Egg, and Abundance. I thought I was going to use some Peacock in there, but after I got into it, I decided I did not need that dark color. And I used several different sizes of sponges and just kind of dabbed it all over, kind of going for that watercolor look with some colors blending together. So I started with my lightest color and went all over the two background pieces. And then I went to the next darkest color, which is Duck Egg, and kind of sprinkled that all around, trying to make sure that I don't have a lot of the wood showing through, but if a little shows through, that's fine. Getting more and reloading as I need it. Also dabbing off when I get too much. And then I'm going in with the Abundance. And I'm okay if it has little circles from the sponge. And I like the bubble look anyway. No rhyme or reason to where I'm adding in color. Gonna make sure that I have all of the background covered. And then I'm gonna go back in with the lighter colors. And there we go. Gonna make sure that that gets really dry. Then I'm going to use Paint Couture's two-step crackle. I want to use a nice clean brush for each of these two steps. And I'm just putting a thin coat all over the background. Then I'm gonna let that dry. I like to let it air dry. Usually it takes about an hour. Setting that aside while that dries, and I'm going to work on the butterflies. And I kind of want an ombre look, so I'm using purples with Kale Sprout, Purple Haze, and Eggplant. And then my corals are Caribbean Coral, Coral Passion, and the yellow is Tuscan Sun. The pinks are French Rose, Vera at the Ballet, and Sugar Plum. And then I'm going in with the pitch black for that top coat of the two-piece butterflies. Just using my sponge dauber, I find that they work better, keeping the paint from dripping into the crevices, making sure I get that nice and covered. Then I'm gonna let that dry while I work on my butterflies. So I'm starting with the darkest color and then moving out, blending a little so that you have that ombre effect. And then as I need to, going back in and darkening it up, and then just blending those together. Just kept working on it until I was happy with it. Now, I think this one is my favorite color combo, which is odd because I don't like yellow in general, but it just turned out so nice. And it's very bright and you can see it through the background. Just added those three colors, starting with the darkest and blending them, going back in when needed until I was happy with them. And then I'm going to go in with the pinks. And on this one, I decided to start with the lightest color instead of the darkest. So I started on the outer wings and then worked my way in with the sugar plum and then just really tried to kind of get them to blend, but also having it brighten up with that pink on the edges. And I'm doing a second coat on the top layer of the butterflies. I'm gonna let that dry really well. I love the Paint Couture mineral acrylics. They go on very smooth, very nice. Um, Now I'm gonna make a sticky board for my pieces, for the flower and for the butterfly garden words. I try to put all the pieces that are going to be the same color together. I'm using Madagascar Mocha for the inside piece of the flowers, and I did water that down so that you could see the dots that are scored into the wood. Watering it down really lets that shine. And then I'm going to go in with barn door for my flowers. Not worried about covering that little piece that's going to be covered with that brown circle. Just getting a nice layer. I go thin on the first coat and then thicker on the second coat. And I hit that with a dryer and then go back in with my second coat. Now I'm going to go in with my greens. I have Misty Fjord, Autumn Sage, and Vintage Moss to start with. And I'm starting with the lightest color, and I'm going to work my way out to the darker color on the edges. I still wanted that ombre effect, kind of give it dimension. Going in with the autumn sage now, kind of hitting the edges and also putting a little bit in the center of the leaves. And then going in with that vintage moss to kind of darken up the edges, blending it as I go, hitting that all with a dryer. And I'm going in with my Cricut weeding tool to kind of get the paint out of the score lines in the leaves because I want them to show up. Now I'm going to go in with garnet on the petals of the flowers. I'm just putting a little line in the middle of the petals to give it a little more dimension. It's hard to see it from here, but it looks really cute. Now I'm going back in with my yellow and corals, the Tuscan Sun, the Coral Passion, and Caribbean Coral, and using my brush to start with the darker color and then come in with the lighter right on top so that it blends at the edge, and then hitting the yellow at the bottom, going back in when needed to get more of the colors to blend, and just working on it until I was happy with it. I do like how it turned out. I love anything ombre. Now I'm going to go in with Simply White and add some dots to the edges of my butterfly with the wood end of the paintbrush, trying to get different sizes and just add a little something to the black outline. Super easy. You can also do this with an embossing tool, hitting the tops and the bottoms of each butterfly. Trying to make sure that I am kind of being even on each side of the butterfly, and then setting that aside when I'm happy with it, and then adding a little bit of embellishment to my letters. You can do this with a paint pen, but I had my white handy, so I went in with my paintbrush, hitting that with the dryer. Then I'm going to set that aside and get back to work on my background. It was still a little wet and sticky, so I hit it with the dryer again. Then I'm going to go in with step two, a new clean brush and a thin layer, just making sure I get that all over. That second layer is thicker than the first, so it kind of likes to string up, but I love how it turns out. Usually I like to let it air dry, but I did use my dryer on this and got it really dry. You can see it start crackling right away. Then I decided I needed to go back on my stems of my flowers with a darker color because I just felt like it was not going to stand out from the background enough. So I'm adding a little evergreen and then buffing it with my finger to kind of blend it since the other colors are already dry, and just kind of working it until I'm happy with it. So I decided I want it to be darker there at the base of the stems and the leaves, but I also needed to add some color all the way up to really get it to stand out. I like how easy it was to kind of buff it into the other colors to blend, and then hitting it with a dryer, making sure everything's good and dry, kind of cleaning up my workspace. And then I'm going to go in with the Van Dyke Brown Semi Gel Stain and use it kind of like uh, a dark wax is what I use a lot of times. But I wanted to see how the stain would do on a sponge to add the distressing effect around the edges of the pieces. So anytime I got it a little too thick, I just rubbed it back with my finger and went around all the edges, even the stems of the plant and the leaves. Then I hit the words, just adding a little. And then I decided I did not need to do that on the butterflies because it wouldn't show anyway. So hitting that with a dryer again. And then I'm going to hit all the pieces with dead flat. I love this top coat because it takes out any of the shine. I'm in my matte era right now. And I like to do this to the pieces before I glue them together because I don't want it to pool up on the pieces that are layered. So I'm just going to hit them all before I glue them together. Give that a good dry. And then I'm going to get back to the background. You can see the crackle. Made sure it was dry. It wasn't quite there, so I gave it a little bit of a dry. And then I went in with my wax and just used that sponge dauber again to give a nice little layer over both pieces. Did not let it sit too long on there. So I did not want it to be super dark, but I did want to give the crackle some definition. So I'm going to wipe that back with a paper towel, just buff it back. And you can really start seeing the crackle come through. And then I went in with a baby wipe again because I did not want it to be too dark. I just wanted the crackle to show up more. So I buff it out with a paper towel, then hit it with the baby wipe. And I love how it turned out. I love crackle. It's so unpredictable. And that's half the fun. Then hitting that with a dead flat, take out that shine. Gonna let that dry. Just needs a thin coat of that dead flat. And then I'm gonna go in with my art glitter glue and start gluing my pieces together. I love this glue because it does dry clear and it doesn't get so sticky on your fingers. And it also has a very fine tip to the end of the bottle, which makes it easy. Just trying to see where I want all my pieces to go and where the flower petals fit onto the plant and which of the little brown pieces fit on each of the flowers. Because there are two that are larger than the other, and I got way too much glue on that little piece. So I'm just gonna kind of dab my other pieces into that to get just a little. You don't need much. Art glitter glue does have a refill bottle that you can use to refill your little bottle. Going in and trying to get some of the excess glue out of the way. It dries clear, but I didn't want any bubbles on the sides of my flowers. Then I'm gonna put my butterflies together, making sure all my edges are lining up. I just love how they turned out. I love butterflies. Again, the coral and yellow turned out to be my favorite, which surprised me. The plant does have a little flat piece at the bottom that lets you know where to line it up, making sure I got it in the center. You can wiggle it a little bit after you put it down. You do have a little wiggle room. Adding all my flowers. These kits by the Rust Cover Cottage are just amazing. The signpost kits are some of my favorites. Here, I went ahead and glued the word butterfly down, and then I started moving it down just a little bit so that I would have room for my flowers that I wanted to place there. And then making sure that I'm lining up the second word properly, and then getting those flowers glued down. I love it. And then as that sets up, I'm going to glue down my butterflies, just kind of wiggle them around, trying to see how I want them. There you go. Thanks for joining me.